Tear it apart. Okay, so we will start if you want. Okay, today we will deal with kind of unexpected realist, since I want to speak of Alfred Pellan. You will see by the works I will show you that normally it's hard to see how he belongs to this realist intention, let's say. And I will proceed that way. There is the work of Pellan is complex. There's a lot of period, if you want, and a lot of hesitation also between one trend to the other. There is definitively a part of his output who could be called realistic, you see. But on the other hand, he was so influenced by all the trends of modern art that a lot of his work have been, in particular, influenced by Cubism. And the real challenge, I guess, of this lecture, it is to see how even a painter influenced by Cubism could be still called a kind of realist, if you want. This is my main topic. But to start with, I will show you a few examples of this more classic type of work that he did in 1941 for boat painting. The one on the left is a landscape inspired from the region of Charlevoix. You see more or less where it is. It's as if you go from here to Quebec and you continue on the north shore of the St. Lawrence, and you have a whole region around Baie-Saint-Paul, for instance, which is called Charlevoix. And I will tell you why he went there and what was the intention of this. And the other painting is called Fillette en Rouge, of a young girl in red. I guess it's just a description of what we see of 1941 also. So to situate these paintings, you have to have a little bit of the context, why suddenly Pellan painted like that, and especially when you think of his previous output. Before that, Pellan had the luck, if you want, to live in France for 14 years. And of course, for him, this was almost the best period of his life. He was really encountering a lot of fantastic painters and people like Picasso, Miro, and all that. Apparently, if you hear him, we heard him because he's no more with us. At the time, you could sit in a cafe and have suddenly Miro in front of you, and you could speak with these guys. And so he speaks of that period in a very, very positive way. And of course, happened the war in 1939, 1940. He could not stay there more. And his coming back to Canada was organized by Paul Beaulieu, who was at the time responsible of the Canadian legation in Paris. And like many others, he just came back home. First, he went to Quebec City, where he was born, a little bit in his family, and then moved to Montreal. And he have met somewhere, and it's not very clear exactly how and when, he had met a painter who is called Philippe Seurat. And I show you here a self-portrait of Seurat, would give a good idea of the man, a little bit austere, but on the other hand, quite an interesting painter of his own, if you want. He met Seurat, and Seurat says to Pellan, okay, you could live in my studio in Montreal if you want. And through Seurat, like Pellan says, he says, there was not a dull moment because I met more or less all the avant-garde of Montreal at the time. Like people like Lyman, for instance, who was close to Seurat, so he could met him there. He met also, let's say, another couple who will be important, let's say, to explain these work that he did in Charlevoix. It is Jean Palardy, who is the author of this painting that you have on the left. Palardy is known not as a painter, I would say, and looking at that, I could understand why his fame have not been too important. Palardy is the author that you may have this book, A Whole Furniture in Quebec. Maybe some of you have that book. You know that this is a very rare book now. It's a kind of a thing that doesn't exist anymore since so many years, and it's very precious. And it was like the Bible for any old furniture collectors at a certain, say, during the 70s. I remember we were looking at that to be sure that we bought the right armoire en point de diamant and all these things. We were excited by the book of Paradis because, and he made also part of his career at the National Film Board. Anyway, he was really a man of many talents, including, let's say, a little bit of painting. This called the Collect of Potatoes, and I think it relates to one of the interests of Palardy in the, I would say, the rural culture of Quebec. And that's why, of course, this man was attracted to Charlevoix also. And Charlevoix is a kind of very special type of region in Quebec. I used to compare it to the Pont-Aven. I says this is the Pont-Aven Québécois, you know, like Charlevoix is to Quebec painter what Brittany in France was for Gauguin and Van Gogh and the people who were attracted both by a kind of rural area and also by a place where, let's say, not too much touched by civilization. And it is indeed one of the profound aspects of tourism, I would say. What attracts a tourist very often, it is this idea of a kind of pre-modern area, you see, in which modernism have not transformed too much the area, and we enjoy to go there to see the old ways or the whole furniture, the whole houses and all that, and also an whole system of work. Nothing is better for a tourist to do nothing, of course, and to look at peasant who works in their field. This is oh, look how hard it makes you feel good and all that, and then you come back to your office and you say, ah, this is terrible, these guys are in nature, it's wonderful, and there's a kind of idealization of this peasant life. And I think it explains a lot of this, I would say, this movement of artists coming from the big city, let's say from Montreal, from Quebec, to this region of Charlevoix, a little bit exactly for the same reason as you want, like Gauguin was attracted also to Brittany to see the whole usage of Bretagne and all that. And of course, these regions have exploited that. They understand that the people come there to see that. And like, for instance, in Brittany, the girls were dressing in the whole costume. And the moment, of course, the artists went back home, they removed it and dressed like anybody else. It was done for them. Like in Hawaii, you can be sure that the girls are not going always with their little skirt, you know, with in fern, I don't know what, to dance in front of tourists. This is done for tourists. And for specific area. And all that. So they understood that, and it created good business. It attracted a lot of people in this region. The same is true in a way of Charlevoix also. They were attracting people there by maintaining the old usage. Sometimes, of course, they wanted to modernize, and they were told not to do so. They had artists who were trying to make them resist to this tendency. Don't sell your whole house, keep it, even if it falls on you. But anyway, keep it as it is, because this is what we want to see here. You hear, for instance, Clarence Gagnon saying that exactly in these words, trying to convince the people of Charlevoix to keep their old usage and their old way of doing. Discouraging, let's say, the fact that they were selling these old furniture to American tourists eventually, because they wanted to have a nice chrome table like everybody else, and to have linoleum on their floor and all that. They wanted to modernize, but it was they were told not to do so. So then you have, and Palardy is certainly representing of that. Palardy was living with Jory Smith at the time. And the other painting that you have on the right side is a portrait of Jory Smith en costume, done by Lyman. So it's a way to evoke both of them. And both were met Pellan through Surrey, and also saw his exhibition that he organized just after when he come back to Quebec and to, let's say, to Canada. He had this tremendous amount of work that he wanted to show, and he exhibited in two places. First in Quebec, in his own city, if you want, in 1940, and then a little bit further in time, in the same years, but in the autumn, he showed also at the Art Association of Montreal, that means in the Museum museum here, in the old part of the museum at the time. And this show was wonderful, let's say very modern, very new. It made a tremendous shock on the avant-garde here. So people never saw before painting influenced by Picasso and so colorful and all that. And you see by all the articles written on Pellan at the time were very, very laudative. You see, this is extraordinary. This is modern art coming to us. In 40, that was certainly the mood. So you meet these couple of Palardy and Jory Smith during this show. They come to visit him because they have met him in Montreal and they know about him. And they offer him to come to their summer place in Charlevoix. And this is why Pellan went there in 40 and 41. He made 2 summers with the Palardy in Charlevoix. And then he decided to do something important in a way, and will give you an idea of the man also. He realized that this show with modern stuff, with Cubist influence stuff, was maybe creating enthusiasm among the intelligentsia, but was not at all understood by the general public. Yeah? And he decided that he should go toward the public a little bit more by doing landscape and portrait and things like that. And this, in a way, it's what he justified. For instance, in 1940, he presented some drawings done in Charlevoix, like this one. And then in 1941, he had a series, maybe 12 of them, of these pictures divided in these 2 themes all the time, or old houses, landscape of Charlevoix, and these little girls, like this one, with glasses. You see, as you can see in her hand there, holding her glasses. They look, these girls look hard and look not in too much good health. Huh? And it's a fact that in the region of Baie-Saint-Paul, if you go there, and if you look a little bit around, you will see huge orphanage there, organized at the time by the Catholic Church, and in particular by Franciscan sisters. And indeed, all this region of Charlevoix was a place where they put kids without parents, kids with health problem, and the region was really poor. Even if it attracted all the tourists like that, very often tourists don't want to see the misery of the place. They want to see it as a kind of pre-modern, what I was calling a pre-modern enclosure, if you want. So this is exciting. But to really go deep and to see, well, the health of these people is terrible. They don't eat like they should. They are in really a little bit like in Gaspésie today. It's the same type of things. You are, if you stay in the tourist way, let's say, you will not see the real misery of the people there. So if you go to some restaurant in Percé and things like that, and you go to see Le Rocher, Percé, okay, everything is okay. But the moment you go a little bit inside of you realize that there's, say, maybe 40% of people who have no work and really big trouble. And Charlevoix was like that. And in a way, the harshness of these portraits reflect that. I don't know if Pellan was very conscious of that, but he chose these models and reflect this aspect of the region. These little girls were coming to Jory Smith anyway because she was painting them since a long time. So she knew many families, they were there many times, and so I guess to find these models was not too hard. But you see, the intention of Pellan was, like you would say, pedagogical. I wanted to create works that could be less modern, let's say less abstract, in order that my public will be able to relate to them. When he showed them, for the first time, not in his big retrospective in 1940, but in December 41, he showed them in his studio. So that means a relatively small exhibition where he had few of these pictures, realistic like that, and others, you see, to show what he was able to do. Then right away, of course, the journalists came and what we used to call, we can call maybe with a lot of brackets, the art critique of the time. Because as you know, in the journal of the time, art was not the most important topics, and sometimes a sport journalist like Monsieur Laberge was named, okay, you do sport, you can do art, follow what's happening and write from time to time something. Alors, then you get, of course, critique, c'est fantastique, but nothing, no description, nothing. Anyway, so, but there was some literati, some people who were a little bit better, and they sense a certain danger in this type of things of Pellan, because their attitude is this: wow, Pellan made such an impact last year, and he seems now to go back, to go toward figuration, and he should not do that too much. So they try in their critique to show that Pellan is versatile, he can do many styles, he's open to many things. Like they would say, he's looking for communication, but he still astonishes us. This is a good formula in which they try to protect the impact that he had before. And one critic who is called Desbiens, who nobody remembered today, Desbiens was more classical, says, oh, at last Pellan showed us that he can really paint, you know, instead of doing all these crazy things that before. And this, of course, the avant-garde of the critic didn't want to be too popular. This type of critique, they wanted to stop it. Especially that he used the word Pellan s'humanise. Pellan become more human. If you begin to say, okay, that figuration equal humanity or to be more human, and abstract means to be non-human, then you have in big trouble if you try to defend modern art, the new trends. So they will see that this aspect of his work will not be too encouraged and will not go too far. In fact, it is very typical of Pellan what he did, because I will show you that if we go back in the past in his own upbringing, you will see that he have always have this kind of hesitation. He says himself, he says, I'm an anxious person. And even in Paris, I was alternating all the time between a more modern style and a more figurative one. I really didn't know exactly where to stand. And sometimes I did very avant-garde thing, and sometimes in the contrary, I went back to this thing. So in a way, when he says that it was to make a rapprochement with my public and all that, this have been said, of course, long time after the fact. But when you try to see how he functioned, I would say that this is a very exemplary of this kind of prudence that you have in Pellan. Pellan is have something of I would say of a paysan normand, somebody that peut-être bien que oui, peut-être bien que non. We never know too much where the public will react and all that. Let's be prudent. You have something of that. And indeed, if you go back in his work, you will see, for instance, and it's interesting to put them side by side, two pictures exactly with the same subject matter and with the same title. Panier de fraises, strawberry, a basket of strawberry, both of them. The one near me, the one on the left, is of 1935, and the other is 1942. Okay, and if you compare them carefully, they look very different because the format is not the same. This one is vertical, the other is horizontal, but you do have exactly the same element. Like, for instance, this vase is repeated here. You have the basket with the strawberry in the middle here. You have a bottle with a kind of a little, how do you call it, an etiquette of something, a label on it written Montreal. Here we cannot read it, but there's a bottle too. There's some apples on the table. You have them there too. You have even playing cards here. You have them there too. You have even a pipe somewhere. Do you see it? Yeah, it's there too. And so all the elements are repeated, but in a completely different style. And this is very typical of what Pellan could do. He will say at a certain point, a thing that will scandalize people like the French surrealist master André Breton. He will tell to Breton, he says, my ambition was to make a synthesis of Impressionism, Fauvism, Cubism, and Surrealism. And Breton, of course, said, this is stupid, this is absurd, you cannot do that. And I understand, in a way, why Breton said that and why he was wrong also, because really, it's what Pellan did. A kind of mixture of all the style and recreating his own world that way. Of course, for Breton, all these movements, if you want, are one against the other and are in succession. But here in Canada and in Quebec, in a way, we learn of all this together. We didn't have a phase here where we were influenced by Impressionism and then Fauvism and then Cubism and then Surrealism. Cubism and Surrealism in particular came together. So the idea of making a synthesis of all these movements is not absurd at all in terms of what Pellan wanted to do. But I understand that in France, this looks absurd. This looks like something is an impossibility because you cannot be Cubist and Surrealist at the same time. The two movements were very much antagonistic and they wanted, but for Pellan, no. For Pellan, you can make, for instance, a picture like that who's closer to Bonnard, if you want, and this one closer to Picasso, and to add to this a kind of sense of color, which is very peculiar to Pellan, that you cannot find really in France either, and make his own style like this, you see, by insisting on color. I'm always surprised to hear people like the plasticiens praising Pellan. More than Bordeaux, in a way, because they are interested in the color in Pellan. And the Molinari says always that Pellan is neglected, we speak too much of Bordeaux, we should speak of Pellan also, and because of the color, because of the importance of color in Pellan. So you see this kind of possible hesitation. Mind you, one painting is of 1935, the other of 42, so you could say, well, there was a lot of time between both. But we can find example also. Where is it? I don't know. It's supposed to be there. It's not there. Maybe I put it here. Wow. Okay. We can find also example of 1934, 35, who are in that side. So exactly contemporary to the other one that I was showing you just there. Exactly contemporary. So with this is almost a classical synthetic cubist painting, exactly like Picasso will do after, I would say, 1913, when he becomes to be more free of the very tight construction that you have in analytical cubism. And then you could see Pellan being able to do the same thing almost in the same year, to have both styles together in the same year. This hesitation you have also with the portrait. And this is interesting also to see, because there he will find another way to do it. Not to oppose two styles so much, than to try to synthesize in the same picture both of them. But of course, he begins with this type of picture here that have to be explained also in Paris at the time. This one is called Jeune fille au collier vert, let's say young girls with a green collar. It's dated toward circa 1930. That means we don't really know exactly when he painted. One little clue that it's a Holder painting, it is his signature. If you notice, he writes then P-E-L-L-A-N-D at the end. And of course, the signature of Pellan now, after, is without the D. And he was asked also, why you do that? He says it's more aesthetical. I never understand why to remove one letter of your name, make it more aesthetical, but for Pellan that was it. And he removed the D, but it's true that his father, for instance, was signing with the D, Pellan, like this. And you do have still in Quebec family who's called Pellan like this with a D. So that could be a clue for an older picture. How to explain this type of picture in France at the beginning of the 30s? I think you have a political situation that could be interesting to look at there. You have first of all, you have the economic crisis and the crash. And of course, this have created all over the world a certain anxiety. You have this. With the 30s, the more we go in France, the more Germany becomes ominous also. In 1933, Hitler go to power, and then people are scared of what will happen. And you will see then a kind of necessity to go back to more, I would say, nationalistic value, if not chauvinistic, sometimes in France in particular. They have the feeling that the so-called École de Paris is too universalist, and they want to come back to main French value. And there's two exhibitions at a time that in a way stress that trend. You have first an exhibition that shows what they call les peintres de la réalité en France au XVIIe siècle. The painters of the realistic painter of the 17th century, in which in particular you had the French public at the time rediscover or discover for the first time Latour, Georges Latour. I show you just one example because they are very famous. And for many painters at the time, they would say, well, this is what we have to do. This is our French route. This is where we have to come back. The hell with the avant-garde and all this. We have to come back to solid value because we are in a period of trouble, in a period where we don't know what is the future for us, and we should go back to our roots. There was this, and there were also nearby in the Palais Royal an exhibition of Le Nain. And Le Nain is a 17th century painter that was better known, but also show the same importance, let's say, of specific value, rural value, for instance, the life of peasant of France in the 17th century, even if it was, again, very poor and such as that, but there was a kind of dignity in this picture. And so much that there's a school, if you want, a group of French painters, they're not very famous now, but call them Force Nouvelle, the new strength. And Pellan was approached by them, and he exhibited with them. In particular, painting in that style, that you could say it's a kind of his own version of this retour aux sources, you say, to go back to the sources of French art and to make realistic pictures, serious, nothing foolish about it. You see that we go back to our roots. One of the hero painter also of this group was Corot. This is one example also just to precise the idea of a famous painting by Corot, who is called La Femme à la Perle, the woman with a pearl. You see she have on her forehead a little pearl. And again, this kind of very simple mise en page. You see, you just see the portrait as it is without too much, no background to tell, no props also to define her more, exactly like in the picture of Pellan. And so this group of Force Nouvelle, Pellan flirted with them. He exhibited with them twice and then regretted that. So it's so typical of him also to go like a pendulum in one direction and then the other. Then what he tried to do after that, it was to create a kind of synthesis between his two interests. The interest in realism and the interest also in whatever modern art there was around. And you do have in some of his portraits. Like here, this one is a jeune fille au col blanc. Let's say young girl with a white collar. It's just a description of what we see. She's immersed in a kind of abstract pattern. Let's say it's more decorative than really abstract. But in a way, what she have behind her and also this kind of table, the design on the table could be seen more or less like more abstract. If you had only that, of course, it would be purely decorative. But so he confront, let's say, the two styles in a way. He tried to integrate them both together in the same picture instead of dividing them, like you saw with the still life before, into two different still life for two different styles. Now in the same picture, he tried a kind of synthesis of both. Another example of that, and maybe even more convincing, it is this picture here of a jeune fille aux anémones. Anemone is because she have these flowers here, she holds these flowers here, and behind her there is one of his painting. In fact, it's not a real painting, it's a painting that he invented for that canvas because we never found it as it is. Behind her there's a kind of a really abstract painting, as if, and he tried to make lot of correspondence between the color of both. You see the green that you have there, you have it also in the painting, the red, of course, in both, and as if to, and even in the flower, you have also the red, blue, and white that compose the whole picture. As if now, okay, you have a confrontation of the two styles, but you have a way to harmonize them through color in particular, as if you wanted to make the synthesis between both. Finally, another example of that, of the same trend, it is this young comedian that you see here, which seems to play with one of the more abstract painting that Pellan did about the same time. Let's see, the jeune comédien, the young comedian is toward around 1937, and this one was 1935, so even before. So again, see, if you had this kind of easy way to classify the painting by dates, let's say, and assuming that the more ancient one are the more realistic one, it's not true. With Pellan, we go from one to the other. But you see the pattern that you have, it's called bouche rieuse, smiling mouth or something like that. The pattern that you have here in the back is repeated here. Of course, it's not a pure quotation of that painting, it's just that he reused this type of pattern. And then the problem was, okay, a confrontation of an abstract pattern with the personage in the foreground, and let's say his act make more or less a transition between both, because you find the same type of little triangle, even the mask that he holds in his hand also with the same type of color create a certain harmony in it. As if, again, it's the same problem, say how to integrate the figure in a kind of more abstract type of context. Of course, this picture has been put in parallel with a famous Picasso Harlequin sitting, Jean-René Ostigui, who have proposed that, and with good reason, because Picasso is certainly one of the big admiration of Pellan in Paris. He was like the god of many, many people at the time, and Pellan met him, and he didn't have words to describe his encounter. I think he met him twice, but anyway, Picasso was nice enough to receive him twice and to listen to his big praise and all that. But anyway, here you may have a contact indeed between both, except that at the time, Picasso was in so-called neoclassic period, and he didn't. He put his Harlequin on a flat background without any suggestion of anything more abstract at the time. So you could say, well, Pellan was trying something else. He was taking inspiration from the realistic aspect of Picasso and trying to create something. But if you go back now, after that, you see to my first landscape of Charlevoix that I was presenting to you, you see how it works. It is, the landscape of Charlevoix basically is a kind of reaction to go toward the public because he's not sure, because of his anxiety, and it is quite typical of his development to go from one side to the other of the pendulum. You have certain artists, like Bordeaux, for instance, for whom the passage toward abstraction or toward non-figuration will be like, I would say, a religious conversion. So you don't go back. You are converted, and then that's it. Maybe a little bit in 1945, he did few figurative painting again, but then after, never. In Pellan, it's never true that. Always the possibility to go back and forth, like in Riopelle, or there's certain artists for whom the division between, let's say, figurative and non-figurative painting doesn't really count. They can circulate in both directions, and Pellan is very typical of that. Okay, so in a way, to demonstrate the interest of Pellan with realism, I think you have the core of his work. Where it is more difficult, it is when he will try, when he will be, let's say, more modern. And I want to situate here an episode that is very important in the life of Pellan to show that he will shift toward more abstract art, let's say more non-figurative one. What happens in 1943, Pellan is hired by the School of Fine Arts in Montreal. The director of the school at the time is called Maillard. You have his name here on this little thing here, Charles Maillard. And what happened, there was a rivalry between two schools of arts in Montreal at the time. You have the School of Furniture, l'École du Meuble, where Borduas was teaching, and Maillard was trying to attract one modern painter to have with him also, in order that this school will be seen also like quite open and all that. And he offered a job to Pellan. Okay, Pellan accepted it. He was, of course, reproached by Borduas to have done this, because Borduas says, you are crazy, you are going in the worst school possible, you should come with us. You will, you see, you will not be able to function there. Maillard is a terrible academic painter, and he's very controlling and all that, so authoritarian and everything. You will have a lot of trouble. And what happened in 1945? There was an exhibition of the end of the year, and in the School of Fine Arts, and the student of Pellan exhibited their work, and suddenly Maillard says, this is not possible, there's two works there who are really scandalous, and they should be removed from the wall. One was a naked lady with, like Pellan says, with the with too much hair, let's say, let's put it that way, with hair too explicit, let's say. The other was a Last Supper scene, but who seems a little bit irreverentious, you see, in which it was like situated in a modern cafe. You know? And so you had on the wall behind Christ, you have beer, Molson, and things like that. So it was written on the glass there. It was a little bit modernized, let's say. And Maillard right away saw the problem there, and he asked, for instance, Monseigneur Valois, who is a Monsignor at the Archevêché here in Montreal, to see the show, and he pointed out, what do you think of that? And Valois come in and said, no, you should remove that, and this is a parody, this is not nice, you know. So Maillard asked Pellan to remove the painting. And then Pellan says, well, I cannot really do that. These kids have worked a lot on their painting, and why should that? So he had suddenly a solution. He says to them, okay, you know what you will do? You will repaint them with gouache. And gouache is very easy to remove from an oil paint, you know, that is dry already. So the nude was clothed. They put a little bikini above her. And the Last Supper was transformed in a beer parlor thing with a gouache. And so they put back their painting. When Maillard saw that, of course, he was completely crazy with anger and have them removed. And okay, so there was a big row. And they have, we don't know exactly how, they have these little stickers. Okay, now I present to you in a slide, so it's huge. It looks huge, but you have to realize it's about that big, where it was called Abba Maillard et l'Académisme. And all the students have that in their pocket and become to glue it on the wall and on the painting in the School of Fine Arts during this June 1945 exhibition. The police intervened. It is the first manifestation, let's say, at the School of Fine Arts. There will be many after, but this is the first one who really make a big havoc, if you want. December after, Maillard was giving his demission at the School of Fine Arts. So in a way, Pellan could say now to Borduas, you see, I mean, I was not so bad. I went there and I get rid of Maillard. Mind you, he was replaced by Charles Bois, plutôt, who was not a great director, was a nice man and all that, but his specialty was miniature, so it's not precisely what we needed. But anyway, he was replaced by another man. So in a way, Pellan could have said to Borduas, I succeeded more or less to do what you didn't do because you were at School of Furniture. But in fact, I would say this painting here could in a way summarize a little bit what I've just told you. It's called La Surprise Académique, the academic surprise or something. And it represents a kind of clown with a reverse head that you see, a kind of upside down head, coming out from a box. A little bit like this jack of the pulpit thing. Let's say that you have a little manivelle and you crank it, and then you let it there, and it popped out from there. And when this thing come out like this, there's a huge colosseum, huge colossus here on the ground. I don't know if you see it. Look at his hand here, his arm, and his head here. And it's like the academic sculpture, if you want, that just fell because this devil came out from the box. So you could say this is almost a depiction of what Pellan, how he saw himself. He is la surprise académique. He is the one who will enter in the academy and will make this huge solid sculpture, let's say, fall as a symbol of the academism that will disappear. And just nearby, there's a little animal here who's really afraid of that. He has so many eyes, he looks in every direction at the same time. He looks really afraid of it. Then this explains also that you have in the foreground instrument of painting, like, for instance, a palette and brushes and colors. And if you go up there, there is a section here that you could say also is autobiographical, because the father of Pellan was a trained conductor. He was working for the CPR. And he was on the line of Montreal, Quebec, Quebec, Montreal. And so all these symbols that you have here, more or less, are related to the railways. And then from there, you have a series of little wheels that goes, and suddenly another shape of palette with a little boat, and then color looking, and then this instrument to mark little holes in paper. In a way, all around it, it's again symbolic of the life of Pellan and also of his craft, of what he does. But Pellan was announcing in 1943 in this painting what will happen in the École des Beaux-Arts after. The fact that he wanted, in a way, to avoid the problem by asking the student to paint their things, to repaint them and to put them back, is not the most revolutionary thing. But because of Maillard was so eager to make a row there and to confront Pellan, it turned as a kind of revolution. But in a way, I think, again, Pellan was prudent there. He wanted to find a middle way, in a way. He says, I want that the painting will be irreprochable, that you could not, nobody will be able to reproach about that. This is, again, quite typical of his approach. Okay, I says, okay, from 1943 and on, the avant-garde movement, let's say, will see that Pellan will really produce much more liberated type of form. Not that he was not able to do this, but this type of hesitation will be less permissible after 1943. And then the big challenge is the following. How could we perceive now the realism of Pellan when he's influenced by Cubism? That's why I want to put a Picasso picture on the screen here to make just a little disquisition about Cubism and realism. It is a fact that the first critic of Cubism, the first critics who defended Cubism, saw it as a form of realism. But then they tried to explain exactly, it's not a realism like Ozias Le Duc, trompe-l'œil. So they have to explain it. And actually they have two arguments that were brought to try to defend Cubism as a form of realism. The first argument was to say that there's two kinds of realism. There's one with a realism of perception, and there's another one with a realism of conception. What did they mean by that? The realism of perception, it is a realism who will be based on what the senses, what the sight, let's say, could see. And the one of conception, of course, will be what a realism coming from the mind. But if you want to give some content to this type of opposition, I think you can to go a little bit further and to say in one case, there is the belief that there's things outside there in the external world, if you want, and we have, through our sight or through our vision, let's say, the possibility to perceive that world. In the other case, the whole world that we are dealing with is completely in the mind. If you speak of realism of conception, the perception of things is no more important in a way. And this, in a way, it's very close to one of the famous philosophers, you see, of the past. I'm thinking of Berkeley. And Berkeley, indeed, is named by the art critic of the time as a kind of philosophical reference to Cubism. Why? Because for Berkeley, as you know, the famous formula, esse es percipi, to exist is to be perceived. Things don't exist outside of the mind, or if they exist, we have no way to know it, because each time we know something, it's through the reaction of our mind. So in a way, you could say esse es percipi, meaning all the things that we see are completely in our mind, and we are not sure that real things exist outside of me. If you want, Berkeley was accused of solipsism, meaning that the world is completely inside of just his mind, but I don't think he wanted to say that. He wanted to say that the only intermediary we have between us and the world is our own perception of the world. And even if you say, okay, maybe there's something behind, okay, if there is something behind, I must perceive it, and then I'm still in my mind. And one of the conclusions of Berkeley, it is that in a way, things that we see are collections of ideas. I would just quote you one passage of Berkeley that explained that, I think, well. He says, it is evident to anyone who takes a survey of the object of human knowledge that they are either ideas actually imprinted on the senses, or ideas formed by help of memory and imagination. By sight, I have the ideas of light and colors, and their several degrees and variation. By touch, I perceive, for example, hard and soft, heat and cold, motion and resistance, and all of these more or less in quantity and in degree. Smelling furnish me odors, the palate with taste, and hearing conveys sounds to the mind in all their variety of tone and composition. And as several of these are observed to accompany each other, they come to be marked by one name, and so to be reputed to be one thing. You understand? Thus, for example, a certain color, taste, smell, figure, and consistent, having been observed to go together, are accounted one distinct thing signified by the name apple. An apple is a collection of ideas. And when you think of the Cubist painting with this type of things, I think we are very close to what the Cubists tried to do. Here it is, let's say, a very typical example of Picasso, I would say later type of still life that he did in 1914 in Avignon, when in the same picture you could say he confronted many of these ideas, but they are stylistic ideas. For instance, you have a part of it with pointillist, like if he was quoting Seurat. And then you have another part with faux naif, I would say, complete as if he were taking very realistic approach to one aspect here, one molding there. And then you have even here a kind of an apple, and then an apple tree in which the peel is like going like this. It's almost a quotation of some old Dutch picture. As if in the same picture you will have many styles, so many, if you want, many conceptions, many ideas, confronted together, and very often also because it's so divided and juxtaposed like this, like you see, for instance, in the journal, the fact that the newspaper there is divided in two parts, and you could say, because of that, you could say that he recreated a kind of world in which basically we are dealing with a collection of ideas. And also with the consequence that behind this, there's not much else. There's not a real world somewhere behind. And this, I think, gives a key to the feeling of immateriality that you have in a Cubist picture very often. This aspect that these aspects are just juxtaposed one to the other and are assembled like that in a kind of construction of the mind. But behind this, we don't know really what exists, what there is. I don't want to pretend that the Cubist painters were Berkeleyan, you know, that read their Berkeley carefully. But what I suggest it is that philosophers sometimes give us a key to interpret picture. It's the other way around. It can make some clarity in our mind when we look at them, and it's not necessary, of course, something that the painters could have thought, or especially not Pellan, for instance. They were, for instance, in the discourse defending the Cubists, very often we find this idea that imitation is not the real way to get to reality. And they always quote this adventure of Icarus, you see, who I showed you the famous Bruegel painting here, where you see this unfortunate man falling in the water. He tried to fly with birds, with the wings of birds, and of course, the more high he went, the sun was hotter and hotter, and because he fixed his feathers with wax, which was the worst idea, of course, it all melted and he fell in the sea. And what is so nice in the Bruegel painting is that nobody seems to care much, you know. Yeah, they just hear pluk somewhere and they continue to work. You see one who is looking upside but in the wrong direction. Anyway, this is a version of the same legend by Pellan, where he shows this flying man above a city like this. It's sweet, but and this is very often in the critical discourse of the Cubists given as an example that imitation is dangerous. You should, like Léger says, if you want, you should not imitate what you want to create. If you want to create something, you should not imitate. You see that? So they make a big opposition between both. They give also very often the example of the so-called primitive painter, like Giotto, for instance, in which the Giotto will organize his picture not according to what he sees, but what he thinks is true. For instance, have you ever asked yourself what will happen when this man will stand up and will want to go in this little house there? See? There will be a big problem. And these little animals here are looks like rats, but they are sheep or things. They are supposed, it's Saint Joachim having a dream, and so the angel comes, and I think these are shepherds. Anyway, it's a part of the Scovegni chapel in Padua, where Giotto have made these number of frescoes. So the Cubists very often quote Giotto as an example of this freedom, let's say, in comparison with perception, and how conception here is important, because it is, of course, the hierarchy of man and animals that Giotto want to express, and even, I would say, man and animal and rocks also. You have really a hierarchy between these three levels of reality, and this is why it's not important to represent them exactly as they are. And of course, the other master that will be a key to Cubism is Cézanne. Then for another reason, what Cézanne have brought to Cubism, and this is almost the second argument toward Cubism as a form of realism, it is this idea that what the painting should reflect, it is the sensation of the painter and not so much what is in front of him. Like Cézanne used to say, je peins ma petite sensation. I'm painting my not small, but my sensation. As not what I see, but how I see the thing. And indeed, if you analyze carefully any still life of Cézanne, you will see this type of intervention of the eye of the painter in the very construction of the painting. For instance, you have here a kind of the side of a table, and then you have the edge of the table. If you continue this edge and this one, you will see that they don't really coincide. And you understand why this little white cloth is here. It is hiding, in fact, the fact that the two sides of the table, I exaggerate with my gesture, are not really one in the prolongation of the other. Why it's so? It is in a way, it reflects the way we see things with one eye, and then if you close one eye, with the other eye. We have two eyes, and we have a certain distance between both, and that means we have one point of view through one eye and a slightly different one with the other. Of course, when we look with our two eyes, we have a three-dimension effect. Since these two images are overlapping, in a way, we have this feeling of being in space and being in 3 dimensions. But if you proceed with one eye and the other, you get 2 different images, and in a way, what Cézanne included there, it's something of that kind. It's something as if he wanted to be close to the sensation, to what he sees, and he gave a chance, let's say, almost to a stereoscopic vision, you see, by 2 different, a little bit like you had at the time, see, stereoscopic photography. You had 2 little pictures that you were looking in a device. In my childhood, we used to call it Viewmaster. This is a thing we got every Christmas, and we broke at every first of the year, you see. And you remember, maybe it doesn't exist anymore. It's still, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we had a dinosaur. It was scary like hell. So we changed, click, click. And it was 2 little pictures that were combined like this through with the lens and created this kind of 3-dimension effect. In a way, you could say Cézanne destroyed it. He separated both images. And the synthesis, in a way, is not done, and it introduced this idea that there's a possibility of, let's say, 2 or maybe multiple point of view on reality. And a point of view, of course, that the cubists will exploit. They will say, why only 2? Things, in fact, are seen by people in movement. We see from this angle and that angle and that angle, and why not to include all of these angles in the same picture? Again, it is like my Berkeleyan hypothesis of before. We have, in fact, a collection of perception on things. And if we want to express all of them, the reality of the things, or let's say its materiality, is less important. We could get rid of it, and we could just stress the sensation. This is the second argument, let's say, that link Cubism to realism, the argument that, in fact, if we are faithful to our sensation, if we want really to be realistic, we cannot have one single point of view. This is, in fact, more abstract than this kind of movement in front of the thing that we could have if we really are faithful to the way we see the world. I don't know if I succeed to make it clear, but I think this is an excellent example of that. And you could find it in many, many of Cézanne picture, this thing. So when we go back after all this to Pellan, and you see, for instance, here, I would say, okay, it's a still life that he made in 1934, who is very cubistic in spirit, in which almost you could probably make a lot of parallel to more, let's say, with the still life with Compotier, with this kind of device with fruit in the middle here. But the touch of Pellan always is a kind of complexity of color, also a mixture of many styles. See, you do have some passage here who are almost like Vuillard or like Bonnard, and others are with a lot of impasto, a little bit like Van Gogh. And so you have always in Pellan this idea of synthesizing many, many trends, but it goes with what I was saying before, with this accumulation of point of view on reality, and eventually even of quotation of reality, things taken from different contexts and created like this. I don't pretend to make exact parallel between, let's say, a Picasso still life or even a Braque still life with this one. But you feel, you realize that this is the same spirit in a way. It's done through the influence of Cubism, and trying to be also faithful to reality, but like the Cubists will be. Realism of conception, not of perception, and Cubism also of many perception, let's say, on reality. Okay. The other exhibition that will have a very strong influence on Pellan during his stay in Paris is a Picasso show, as you can imagine. In 1935, Picasso had a big retrospective in La Galerie Petit, which was not a small gallery, it's the name of the Monsieur Petit, Georges Petit, who had this gallery in Paris. And there was a big retrospective of Picasso, in which, in fact, you had few of these pictures of the time, you see, of closer to that period. like these batter near the sea, or these three dancers here that you have, who are in fact almost in competition with Matisse at the time. If you have seen the show in New York, they are presenting Matisse and Picasso together, and indeed this is one of the Picasso things that maybe is closer a little bit to Matisse. Not that, of course. The one on the left is typical of the portrait of his mistress when the things goes badly. Picasso transformed them as kind of, she looks like a predator, like a kind of praying mantis, you see, with huge claws like this, and it's really dangerous. Don't kiss that girl, you know, you will have. And anyways, the Picasso and portraiture it could be a course by itself, you know, it's very, very typical of it. But these pictures have certainly made a profound impression on Pellan, and you will find some of his picture that follows that exhibition in which you will see again this same type of relationship with a human figure now. This one is called Sur la plage, meaning on the beach, so it's very close to the subject matter of Picasso. And it represents kind of a huge profile, his own profile in a way. It's almost an auto-portrait of Pellan, and with three ladies that appears in different positions around him. It's a little bit macho, as the people at the time were. And God forbid that it will be still. And so you have also another aspect of Pellan's work at the time. It is the complexity of surface, as if he had an urge to decorate each surface. And sometimes it's not very efficient. It's too charged. There's too much thing. But if you look closely, you will see these little squares and these little dots done with the tube. You see directly on the canvas like that create this type of complex type of surfaces. As if not only you will have all these point of view, but also a tendency to ornate too much the surface. This is certainly. And then the personages are, like very often in Picasso also, they are showing in different angles. They are impossible, of course, anatomically, but the way they are presented, it is as if you were seeing the personage on many angles at the same time. You have this also in this picture. It's called Four Women, Quatre Femmes. So you have one here, another one here, and finally there's one who borrow her tie to the other one. Do you read it like me? You see the face, you see, and you follow that leg. But that leg belongs to this one too. No? This is one of her leg, and this is the other one. As if, again, you could combine the form like this and create and again, the same type of pointillism and over ornamentation. In some case, it comes so complex and so difficult that it's almost unreadable. It's called citron ultraviolet. Well, the lemon are there. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are a few of them. The only detail who's a little bit realistic here is a pair of hands, and I think more or less what he suggests, it is a juggler who's throwing lemon in space like this. But then the whole space is full of detail and all that, and this is a kind of decorative aspect of Pellan picture that in a way could be dangerous, that he could go too far in that direction. And to my taste, I guess the best Pellan picture are more bold and simple than that. Like this one is called Au clair de la lune, 1937, in which you have two profiles, one in front of the other. Obviously lovers, you see the eyes are turning, they are not stable. And it's probably the girl here because of her costume. And behind, of course, you have a big moon. And this idea, of course, of using transparency, it's an idea that you have in Cubism also. Since we are dealing with many layers of perception, you could have, to read them, you could have transparent things, because we have so many things to add one to the other. We need some transparency to be able to put all of them together. And again, this underlines this immaterialism that I was mentioning before. This one is called landscape with the, guess where the woman is in the landscape. Well, it's not too difficult. I guess now we are used to so many pictures. You have a head is here upside down, and it is a landscape. In fact, it's more difficult to see here. Maybe kind of volcano here, and then this kind of clockwork movement of these heads here on the side. One of the painting of that period that I find more intriguing is this one, which is called a painter in a landscape. And in fact, I show them here vertically, but it should be horizontally. Why? Because I wanted to make a parallel with one Picasso picture I think that is really related to that picture. So you have to imagine, like in this Harlequin of Picasso, done in 1913, in which Harlequin, of course, is a personage that Picasso identified with. He's a kind of clown, but also a symbol of spring. And he make it rather somber here because the head doesn't look too joyous, even if you have a row of teeth and all that, but it's white like a skull, because at the time his girlfriend Eva Guel is dying, and he is rather in a somber mood. But he put the Harlequin like this in front of an easel, and what he have in his hand here is a kind of palette, if you want, but square, very. And I don't know if it's exaggerated, but I almost see a profile here of Picasso himself, as if he put himself in the picture. And when you go back to the Pellan, you will see more or less the same type of organization. You have here, again, a kind of square with like the palette and a kind of vertical personage like this maybe. There is a suggestion of easel. I don't know if you see it here in black, with a little painting who represent just a road with the mark on the street, white and black, this little painting here. So it's almost like a painter also, like the Harlequin. But finally, by the signature of the picture, we know that it goes horizontally. And there's some photo of accrochage when the painting was shown in a show where you see that he put it horizontally. So, of course, then it becomes a painter in a landscape, because with the horizontal format, of course, it suggests rather a landscape. And finally, I want to leave you with this picture, with a masquerade that you could see at the Musée d'Art Contemporain here in Montreal, which is really a masterpiece of Pellan, where you really control all his means. It's done on the theme of mask, if you want. You have 5 of them, very different and very transposed, but with very much control type of space, not too much ornamentation. They're a kind of really well-balanced work. So when we conclude what was the Pellan was a realist of perception or conception, you could say both in a way. Some of his work are really realistic in more classical way. Like the first one I showed you, this landscape and these portraits and all that, are in a way realist of perception. But also because of the influence on Cubism on him, he had also this kind of realism of conception. And the importance of Pellan, let's say, for the art in Quebec and maybe more in Canada, I think come from this kind of polyvalence of Pellan. You have to understand that when he came here in 40 and showed all these pictures, because many of them that I show you, in fact, were done or in France or very early in his stay here, when he showed that, it was like a discovery, a massive discovery of modern art. And in a way, it's unfortunate that after a certain spirit of the avant-garde have pushed aside Pellan. He had a very strong impact in 40, but after when the surrealists took over, let's say, and the automatists in particular took over, you could see then Pellan was put a little bit aside. In particular, one of responsible of that is certainly Bordua. In his little pamphlet, which is called Projection Libérante, Bordua presents Pellan like a cubist. And he sees himself as a surrealist, like as if surrealism is following cubism, is more avant-garde, is more. And the moment the painting here becomes to define itself like an avant-garde cannot be multiple. You know, you have to have one little acumen in front and people behind. The moment we begin to think that way, Pellan was more or less doomed in the sea. And that's why we see very little of his painting, even if retrospectively, you can say that his influence was colossal. You see, he came with a revelation of modern art here in Quebec when he showed in 1940. Okay, so thank you.